If I could speak 1,000 languages, if I could tell what's in the future, if I could know all things that can't be known but don't have love. Hi, my name is Greg Barr, and I would like to share something with you that is very personal, very important, and very true. And I don't want it to come across in any way as cliche or corny. So here it goes. About 40 years ago, my life radically changed for the better. And part of that change was due to the Bible. Since then, the Bible has been for me a daily support, a daily encouragement, a guide, a teacher, a corrector, a foundation for my life, and a life giver. And I would like to share some of that with you. I also want to add right now that I do not claim a corner on the truth at all. I am one of many, many Bible teachers around the world and through time. But I know there is something here for you. So for the next 30 minutes or so, stay with me, open your heart, open your mind, and see what God may have for you. And may He bless you largely. Hi, I'm Greg Barr, and I'm on a beautiful beach on Cape Cod, and this is Luke, the Gospel of Luke, or the Book of Luke, Session 13. And I'm just going to start reading from Luke chapter 5. Here we go. One day, as Jesus was standing by the lake of Gennesaret, with the people crowding around him and listening to the word of God, he saw at the water's edge 2 boats, left there by the fishermen who were washing their nets. He got into one of the boats, the one belonging to Simon, and asked him to put out a little from shore. Then he sat down and taught the people from the boat. When he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, "Put out into deep water and let down the nets for a catch." Simon answered, "Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything. But because you say so, I will let down the nets." When they had done so, they caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. So they signaled their partners in the other boat to come and help them, and they came and filled both boats so full that they began to sink. When Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knees and said, "Go away from me, Lord, I'm a sinful man." For he and all his companions were astonished at the catch of fish they had taken. And so were James and John, the sons of Zebedee, Simon's partners. It's really hard for me to keep going and not say, remember Zebedee Doodah, Zebedee Doodah, Zebedee Day. Well, anyway, then Jesus said to Simon, "Don't be afraid, for from now on you will catch men." So they pulled their boats up on shore, left everything, and followed him. So I want to take a little time here and talk about the word disciple. At the heading of what I just read in this particular Bible, it says the calling of the first disciples. And the word disciple, as you know, is not very much used in our culture today. And it seems like if you do hear it, it's kind of a bad word. It's used in cults a lot, I think. And it kind of has the air of being controlled by something. But let me tell you the real definition of the word disciple, and that is student. A disciple is a student, or a pupil, or a learner. Technically, another definition is someone who accepts and helps to spread the teachings of a famous person. That could be a lot of people, right? Vine's dictionary says, a disciple was not only a pupil, but an adherent. Hence, they are spoken of as imitators of their teacher. Imitators of their teacher. So right off the bat, Let me ask you this. Do you want to be a student of Jesus? Do you want to be an imitator of Jesus? And for me, the answer is a resounding yes. I want to be a learner from Jesus, and I want to be an imitator of Jesus. I've been in so many situations in my life in the past year, some pretty odd ones. And I'll tell you, I don't know what to do in so many situations, but I know that if I am like Jesus in those situations, I am being the best I can be. So yes, I want to be a learner from and an imitator of Jesus. Maybe you do too, because you're watching me right now. So this message is how to become a disciple of Jesus. And this is part one, and I'm going to talk about 4 things today. Here's the first one. Interest. Of course, any relationship starts with interest, right? I met my wife in 1979. She was a mere 17. We met in Dallas, Texas, in college, and I was actually 24. And she says the thing that first got her interested in me was my goofiness, and especially around children. And she will say that what stirred my interest towards her were her painter's pants. That's not entirely true, but I gotta say, it did help. So anyway, interest, beginning of any relationship. In what we just read in Luke chapter 5, it says people were interested in Jesus. Wherever they were at, they were interested in Jesus. It says people were crowding around him and listening to him. The word interest is very closely related to the word curiosity, isn't it? Curiosity, by definition, is a feeling of wanting to learn more about something or to be involved in something. Just the pure basic wanting to know more or be more involved. For me, 40 years ago, or 41 or 42 years ago, I started to get curious about Jesus. I want us to start to learn more about Jesus a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit. Initially, and I can look back at my life and see things that kind of piqued my interest back then. One was a movie called Oh God with George Burns. It was a funny movie, silly movie, but you know, that started to get me thinking. Another thing was somebody gave me a book by Norman Vincent Peale. That started to get me stirred up a little bit to want to know more. Not to make me jump in, but want to know a little bit more. And there were several things like that. You know, I'm sitting on a beach right now, and I remember up in Manistee, Michigan, and I was doing yoga on the beach. And I remember just noticing, I don't know how else to say it, but kind of the harmony or the rhythm of the waves and of the wind blowing the grass. And I don't know, it just seemed like this all is not a mistake and someone's in control of this. And it started to get me curious about who that one might be. And at this point, just the point of interest or curiosity about someone, about Jesus, there is nothing deep here. There's nothing theological here. This is not a commitment in any way. It is just the step of curiosity. Every relationship starts with interest. There are many examples in the Bible of this, and one is in John chapter 3, where this guy named Nicodemus. He was actually a religious leader. But he was hesitant to approach Jesus, so he approached him at night. And he had a few words with Jesus and had some questions. That was his curiosity. That's as far as he was willing to go at that moment anyway. You know, Jesus said, ask and it shall be given. He was saying, follow that curiosity. There's another verse that I love, and I love for myself. I've seen it work for myself, and I have seen it work for many people through the decades, and that is Matthew 5. Jesus said, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. And the word righteousness just means rightness. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for rightness. You know why? He says, because they'll be filled. So you know what? You are watching me right now. You have some kind of curiosity about Jesus. You have some kind of interest towards Jesus. And you just keep following that, because you will be filled. Here's the next thing, the next word I have about becoming a disciple of Jesus. The first was interest. The second is challenge. The word challenge literally means a call to effort, a call to action, to stimulate. The word challenge, it's like a call to take it to the next level. Every relationship has to move on if it's going to survive and thrive. We read this in Luke chapter 5, and Jesus did this with Peter when he said, hey Peter, let me sit in your boat, take it out a little bit so I can speak to the crowds. And Peter did. And then Jesus goes even farther, and he said, take your boat out and throw out your nets, and let's see what happens. That was a challenge to Peter. And an author, N.T. Wright, said, become Peter for a moment. He said, Jesus tells him to do something that seems pointless, a waste of time, a waste of effort. And this is the place where we all need to answer, do I really want to pursue this? Do I really want to take a next step? Jesus did that with Peter. Jesus does that with you. And Jesus did and does that with me. Jesus said to Peter, Peter, set sail with me going out a little farther. And I wholeheartedly believe that God says that with you. Would you come out with me a little further? Author and pastor John Ortberg wrote a great book with the title, If You Want to Walk on Water, You Gotta Get Out of the Boat. And a quote from that book is this. He says, the decision to grow always involves a choice between risk and comfort. So let me ask you this. What challenge might Jesus, what challenge might the living God be posing to you today? What challenge to move on to another level or take the next step in a relationship with Him and in life might He be posing to you today? I remember decades ago when somebody told me about a Bible study, and it was someone who was not Christian or God-centered or religious in any way, shape, or fashion. They just heard of a lady, they said. I was at a party and everybody was high and she mentioned that. But it, again, piqued my curiosity No one told me I should go to this Bible study. Nobody invited me. But inside, I felt something kind of pushing me to take that step and check it out. God does that in our lives. You know, there's a place that says, draw near to God and He will draw near to you. There's this thing that goes on, and you probably know that. There's this thing that goes on between us and God personally. We get near to Him and He draws us in. There's a place, Jesus said, my sheep hear my voice and I know them and they follow me. You know, there's a place that says in the Old Testament, book of Isaiah, come all you who are thirsty, come to the waters. And you who have no money, come buy and eat. Come buy wine and milk without money and without cost. Why spend money on what's not bread, and your labor on what does not satisfy? You know, God is saying, I'll give you something that money and stuff cannot buy or satisfy. He says, listen to me and eat what is good, and your soul will delight in the richest of fare. Give ear and come to me, hear me, that your soul may live. We're talking invisible soul stuff here, and I'm asking you, how might God be challenging you, urging you to go to another level with Him today? Because I fully believe He is, just like He does with me on a regular basis. Well, here's the third thing about how to become a disciple of Jesus from Luke chapter 5, and that is, I thought of the word acquiescence. To acquiesce means to accept, to agree, to allow something to happen by staying silent or not arguing. This situation in Luke chapter 5, very interesting. Jesus says to Peter, hey, pull out into deep water and put out your nets. I can just get the feeling of Peter at this moment. He says, Master, we worked hard all night and haven't caught anything. But, because you say so, all right. Peter acquiesces. At a later time, we read that even Jesus wrestled with God the Father sometime. Before His crucifixion, it says He was praying, and He says, God, I don't want this to happen, but if you want it to happen, let it happen. Your will be done. We all come to places in our lives where we wrestle with God. In fact, there's an Old Testament story, Genesis 32, where a guy named Jacob literally wrestled with an angel of God all night. And how did that happen? Details, I don't know. However, he wrestled with God, and that's a point I get from my life. Sometimes we got to wrestle with God about stuff. And I want God to win. Do you want God to wrestle you down and win? Some things are hard. Some things that we read in the Word are difficult to accept. I have friends of every persuasion, every lifestyle, every opinion, and every thought, and I love every one of them. And I say to each one of them, you got to get with Jesus. And I know your thoughts or your lifestyle do not agree with the Bible. But I say, you get with Jesus, and you got to work this out with Him. You got to figure it out. You got to wrestle it out with Him. Say, God, I know you say this, but I feel this way. I know you say this, but I've been doing this all these years. You got to wrestle it out with God and let Him gently and lovingly and convincingly bring you to the point of agreement, because He will and He can. And I'm not talking about any human getting down on you. I'm talking about between you and God. You have to genuinely work it out with Him and come to the point of acquiescence like Peter did. There's a place in the Bible it says, Jesus said, "Behold, I stand at the door and I knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I'll come to him and I'll eat with him." Will you open the door? Will you acquiesce or allow Jesus to take you to the next level? Or at least this. I had an old friend, Pete, on Martha's Vineyard when I lived there. And he would pray, "Lord, please make me willing to be willing." Maybe that's where you're at. Jesus, make me willing to be willing. I'm having a hard time acquiescing here. Jesus said, "I stand at the door, I'm knocking. I want you to open up." Say, "Jesus, help me open up." Well, here's the last word I got, okay? How to become a disciple of Jesus. And that word is evidence. Peter and his friends got evidence that Jesus is the one to follow. What was that evidence? Well, number one, after not catching fish all night, it says they got a large number of fish. And number two, I find interesting. I never thought about it too much till I was studying this time around. It says their nets began to break and their boats began to sink. And I just thought that was an interesting point. It wasn't, the evidence for Peter to follow Jesus wasn't all necessarily good and positive stuff, but his nets were breaking and his boats were sinking. And I won't belabor this point, but I think that sometimes evidence that we should follow Jesus is the good and, hallelujah, blessing stuff. But sometimes he makes our boat sink, so to speak. And we can say, "Okay, Jesus, I'm getting this. I'm going to follow you." There's a place in the New Testament, most of you have heard of Doubting Thomas. And he got that reputation for a couple of reasons. And one of them is after Jesus rose from the dead, Jesus is standing there with him and some other followers. And Thomas says, "I'm not going to believe this. I don't believe it's you." And Jesus said, "Go ahead, Thomas. Feel my hands, feel the scars on my hands and my feet." And then he says, "God, I believe it's you. You're the living God, Jesus." And Jesus says to him, "You have seen me and believed, Thomas, but blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." And that's us today, right here. But even with that in mind, there is still a point of evidence, some kind of even invisible evidence that we all must come to in order to follow Jesus. We all need some kind of evidence, so to speak, to take the plunge. For me, the second Saturday of September 1978, that night, alone in my apartment, when I realized my sin, my waywardness, that I was the cause of my personal problems, and I realized there was forgiveness, evidence for me that particular night, like within hours, was one, I had this knowledge and even this feeling of being forgiven, clean of my sins and wickedness and wrongdoing. I realized I was off, but I realized I was clean because Jesus died on the cross for me. I never had that before. And number two, within hours and days, I didn't want the things I used to want. My thinking was actually different. This was concrete evidence, and since then, we're talking almost 40 years ago, there's been many other pieces of evidence for me that Jesus is the one to follow. Concrete evidence that it's just real. Lee Strobel, in his book, The Case for Faith, excellent book, he said, ultimately, faith isn't about having perfect and complete answers to every single objection. After all, we don't demand that level of conclusive proof in any other area of life, right? We don't demand 100% knowledge in any area of our life, right? We just got to be pretty sure, and we go with it. Buying a car, getting a spouse, so many things. The point is that we certainly do have sufficient evidence about God upon which to act. And in the end, that's the issue. Faith is about a choice, a step of the will, a decision to want to know God personally. Lee Strobel goes on. He says, I was thankful that I didn't have to throw out my intellect to become a Christian. But I did have to overcome my pride. I did have to drive a stake through the egoism and self-adulation that were keeping my heart shut tight from God. Let me lead you in a prayer right now, okay? If you'd like to, pray something like this. Jesus, I want my heart to be open to you. Jesus, I am interested in you. Jesus, I know you are challenging me to move forward in you. Jesus, I accept and I acquiesce for you to take me further. And Jesus, show me more and help me see. Amen. So I wonder what you may have gotten out of what you just heard. I hope you were comforted. I hope you were encouraged. I hope you learned something about God, or at least gained more curiosity about Him. I hope if you're not part of a church that you would check out New Road in Centerville. And I hope most of all that you would turn to Jesus. He is the only one who can give you the life that you were created to have, that you were meant to have. He is the only one who can give you the best life possible. So I'm going to do a little more of that song that I started in the beginning. I thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time, God bless you. And if I was the smartest guy in town, and if I had faith to move a mountain, if I gave all I had to feed the poor, but don't have love, cause love is patient, love is kind, love gets hurt but doesn't mind, doesn't grab and won't demand or put you down. Help me to love like that, oh Lord. Help me to love like that, oh Lord. Help me to love like that, oh Lord. I can't do it on my own.